time to spruce up the patio for a friend. We made some simple box cushions. No piping, no zipper. Cute, cute fabric. So the first thing you have to do is make sure you cut your fabric the right size. That's very important. You want to compress it just a little. So I make my fabric for the top and the bottom the exact same size as the foam, and give myself only 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So there's 2 pieces that are the same. But for the sides all the way around, I don't want to compress it, so I add 1/4 of an inch seam allowance for both sides, so that's 1/2 an inch. So the piece was 2.5 inches wide, and I made it super long. You'll see why here in a minute. But I made it longer than I needed to go around all 4 sides, and I'm not going to put seams in it. First thing I did was fold the edge back and sew right at my seam allowance. So I'm 1/4 inch off of that top edge, and then I'm going to sew that 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down one side. So at this first corner, I marked where I wanted to turn. So I marked 1/4 of an inch off of the bottom. I sewed until my needle was right on top of that pin, pulled the pin out, and pivoted with the needle down. Turned it so that my sides keep going all the way around, one continuous piece there, and then sew to the next corner. Same thing, keep the needle down, spin the fabric, straighten out the side piece, and keep going. So that is, what, 3 sides? And then, is this the 4th side? I think, oh wait, I had to back up and make sure I got all the way to the corner. I think this is the 4th side. So look what happens when we get to that last corner. That piece that was there where we started, it's just down out of the way. Sew to the corner and pivot. Now, overlap the end with the part where we started. Sew that down, and now the corner is made with the fold right there at that corner. So here's the big secret. I'm not going to sew it up. I'm just going to leave it open. Don't tell my friend that I'm making it for. I don't know if they'll even ever notice. But see, that is just going to make the corner. But because it overlaps several inches, it's going to be fine. Since I don't have any seams at the corner of my side piece, I'm putting pins in there at the corner so that I can make sure I turn it at the right place and get it so that it's square, because we don't want some kind of crazy 3D polygon. Haven't you watched the weather? Polygons are bad. We do not want polygons. Okay, so now I'm going to put the bottom or the top. They're the same. I'll put that on there. So it's 1/4 inch seam allowance. I can use that pin there to see that I'm 1/4 inch past on that end. But I still started in the middle to pin it to make sure it's even so that I didn't get it stretched awkward on one side or the other. But then I'm going to pin this all the way around on all 4 sides. I'm going to find the middle, pin it, and make sure I'm 1/4 of an inch seam allowance at each pin on the far corners. However, I am not going to sew all 4 sides because I have to have an opening to get the foam inside of the cushion. So after I get them all pinned and straight so that they don't just walk around and end up with the polygon, the dreaded polygon, then I will sew around on the 3 sides. However, I am going to turn the corners. It'll be much easier if you turn the corners to have them neat than it is to try to go back and sew them by hand. I'm going to start there on that overlap corner so it's all kept down in place. I'm going to have to undo some of the pins to be able to straighten out the side piece so that I can get all the way to the 1/4 inch seam allowance. But the pins are still very helpful to help keep it organized as I work my way across. Same thing we did the first time. Sew to within 1/4 inch of the edge, leave the needle down, turn, and sew. Now, if you can take your pins out and not sew across them, it is better. Sometimes you have to sew across the pin. It's not always avoidable, but if you can avoid sewing over pins, that's good because sometimes they cause problems. And break the needle, break the thread, make it jam up. Anyway, if you can take the pins out, do. If you have to leave it in, sometimes that is how it works. There are times when I need to leave them in. But for this, I'm going to take it out. So now I'm back to that last corner. I'm going to get to within 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to turn and I'm going to sew a few inches and then back stitch. And that is all of the machine sewing that I'm going to do. Reach to the farthest corner, pull it, and turn it right sides out. Work those corners so that they're all pushed out. It'll be easier to do it now than once the foam is down in there, and try to fight it. Now look, there's the one. Shh, it's a secret. All right, time for foam. So So I had these bags from another project I had done. These were pillows that go with this, but I had these bags from it. So I'm going to use the bag. You could use a piece of rope, a piece of ribbon or something, but I had these bags. So I'm using the bag to help hold it in a circle so that I can get it through my opening. So, ow, I think I hurt my fingernail. Now I'm going to have that end held, and I can hold the end I'm working in one hand, fight the fabric with another, and have the bag on the far end to help hold it around so that I can work it in there. You have to be careful at the edge of the opening so that you don't cause that little bit of the seam there to get all ripped up looking and make your fabric distort because it's pushed so hard as you're cramming through the hole. Now I'm going to work the corner of the foam up into the corner of the cover. As tight as I can get it up in there, I want to get it up to that corner. Because remember, the foam is not just the right size, it's actually a little too small, and it's going to be compressed slightly around. So push those far corners in until they're tight and then work the rest. It is like a wrestling match to get the foam in there when it's this tight, but it's going to give you the best results if it's this tight. If it's too tight and it won't lay down flat, then you're going to need to go in and change your seam allowance. Hopefully you have enough seam allowance in there to change it. If it won't lay down flat though, it's going to take a long time before it finally will. But these worked out fine. You can rub on it. It just took a minute for me to get the seam to be right on the corner. But there we have it. Okay. I wanted to close these cushions by hand because it's less obvious than if you do it on the machine. So in order to make that a little bit easier, I folded in my seam allowance and pinned it. Because as you push it and move it around on that foam is very grippy and it would have tried to unfold it. So I wanted to pin those seam allowances in so that I can sew them as neat as possible. Here is a helpful tip. This is beeswax, and I have to say this beeswax is like 30 years old or something. I've had it since college, and that has been a hot minute. Anyway, if you run your thread through the beeswax, it makes it a little stiffer and stronger, and it also prevents it from knotting quite as easy. Okay, so tie a knot in the end, and then we can start. I am right-handed, so I want to sew from right to left, but first I had to get it in there. That's why I went left first, to leave the knotted tail in there. But then from now on, I'm going to work from the right to the left. And I wasn't able to get a colored thread that matched because it changes color as I work across. So in order to make the thread show as little as possible, I did this back and forth where I would catch like, I don't know, a little bit. I don't know how much that is, a little bit, and then go straight across. Instead of letting the thread go diagonally across the seam, I wanted it to go straight across the seam as good as I could, and that makes it show less. And there it is. Isn't it lovely? All right, there you have it. Simple box cushions, no piping, no zipper, no problem. Remember, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is he whose refuge is in him. See you next time. Remember, don't tell the little secret about that seam isn't sewn up.